I want to speak about this topic to make a point. Somebody was trying to argue with me, but they didn't understand where I was coming from. So talking about this topic um, to make the point. So topic is white basketball, black basketball, Chinese basketball. Is there such a thing? No, there isn't. Because it's a sport. Basketball is a sport that transcends these racial barriers. It's not representing a culture, it's just a sport. Now, as long as the sport has the same rules, then there is no distinction. So, white basketball, if it has a set of rules, and then black basketball, if there was such a thing, and they have the same set of rules, then there wouldn't be necessary to distinguish between white and black basketball. Same thing with Chinese basketball. If it had the same set of rules, then you don't need to say Chinese basketball. But if Chinese basketball had different rules, then it'd be right to distinguish a difference. So say hypothetically Chinese basketball, there's no dribbling required. Like you could double dribble or you don't have to dribble at all. Then to say Chinese basketball is different than American basketball, it would be proper because it's different rules. So, but back to this example, say there is no difference. They have the same set of rules. White basketball, black basketball, and Chinese basketball all have the same set of rules. So there's no need to make a distinction. But if they still wanted to make a distinction, they could based on race. So say they said, okay, all the white basketball players that are best in the world, get over here in this corner. All right, all the black basketball players that are best in the world, stand over there. All the Chinese basketball players that are best in the world, then you stand over there. So say that was the case, okay? Then you would have, then you had them all compete amongst one another. You put all the white basketball players against all the black basketball players. And then you put all, the white basketball players against the Chinese basketball players. Then you put the black basketball players against the Chinese basketball players, and you basically just have them all compete amongst one another. Kind of like how the Olympics are, right? But you divide the people based on race opposed to country. It just so happens that America has a lot of different nationalities, a lot of different races. So you have a lot of black athletes representing America. But no other country is really like that. If you look at the Japanese squad, it's all Japanese people. You go to the Chinese squad, it's all Chinese people. You go to the Russian squad, it's all Russians. America's the only country where you'll have mostly blacks representing their country, not even that many whites. So, but if you divided these people based on race instead of country, then all the blacks in America would have to be representing Africa. They wouldn't be representing America. So, if you had them compete amongst each other, we already know what the answer would be as far as basketball is concerned. The blacks would be the best by far. They would be the most dominant. Because you look at the best basketball players to ever live, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, and the list goes on and on. It's pretty much all black basketball players. So it would be safe to say that they are dominant in that sport, and that if you wanted to learn to be the best that you possibly can, it would be wise to study the black basketball players opposed to the other basketball players that are not even at that level. So who's representing the Chinese basketball players? It might just be like Jeremy Lin and Yao Ming, which is nothing compared to the black representation. And the whites, they might have John Paxson and John Stockton and Larry Bird, but it's still nothing compared to the black basketball group that's being represented. So they would be the ones, the authority under the game of basketball. Even if basketball was created, the game of basketball is created by a white person, the blacks would still be the authority of the basketball at this time because of their excellence in that sport. It's nothing to do with race as far as, hey, every single black player is going to be better than a white player, but based on this the science of this experiment, the conclusions are right before your eyes. The best basketball players to ever live, that at that level, at the highest level, end up being in the black group. Okay, so they become the authority in that area. Now, when you bring it back to the martial arts scene, when I say Chinese martial arts, it's just a distinction of race. It doesn't mean that the Chinese people could beat up the other races the most effectively, because clearly we know that's not the case. Because they're not even about that, and they're really small to begin with. So when I say people that are representing the Chinese martial arts need to be Chinese, I'm just indicating that their race has to be identified with that expression, because that's why you're saying Chinese martial arts and not Japanese martial arts or African martial arts or Caucasian martial arts. Okay, if you say Caucasian martial arts, why are you saying Caucasian? Well, because the people in that group are Caucasian. So you're calling it Caucasian martial arts because everybody in that group is Caucasian. So basically, if you are Caucasian, you're not supposed to be on the Chinese martial arts group because that's not your race. Okay, same thing with the black martial arts. If you're black, if you're representing the black martial arts, then you're not in the group of the Chinese martial arts. You're not in the group of the Caucasian martial arts. You're in the black martial arts group. So the identification by race is just an identifier to put the people in the proper groups that they belong. So what's going on is that the Africans and the Caucasians, they don't have martial arts. That's not within their culture. They are mostly, if they're mostly into the sports. So the arts are from the East, not here in the West. That's why the Caucasians and the blacks have to go under an Asian representative of the martial arts in order to practice the martial arts, because it belongs to the East. So that's why a black person will end up deciding whether or not he wants to represent the Chinese martial arts, the Japanese martial arts, the Filipino martial arts, or the Thai martial arts or whatnot over there in the East. A black or white person will have to go over there and decide which one that they want to basically apply for, and then eventually become qualified to represent through the permission of the master of that art. So essentially the way it's supposed to go is there's a Chinese martial arts master in China, and he's willing to teach Caucasians and blacks the Chinese martial arts. They need to apply to see if they're qualified to be a part of that group, and then once they become a part of that group, they got to train hard to represent that group under the guide of the Chinese martial art master. And the Caucasian and the black cannot be an authority over the Chinese martial arts, because it is a Chinese creation to represent that country or that race. They can't be the main authority, but they could be a part of the representation. So that's like, the owner of Apple Computers, say like Steve Jobs, he's the CEO, then he could hire employees, he could hire managers, but nobody's going to overtake him unless he dies and he decides for somebody to replace him. But during the time that he's living, he will ultimately decide whom will have what position in his company. So the Chinese martial arts belongs to the Chinese people. So a white person or a black person cannot go in there to represent the Chinese martial arts because he is not Chinese. But he can go in there to be one of the representators through the permission of the authority of the Chinese martial arts. And that's pretty much all I'm saying. And I'm not necessarily saying that the Chinese martial arts is the best compared to all the other martial arts, such as the Japanese and the Korean and the Thai and the Filipino. I'm just saying that proper representation within the groups, each group within each country, is very important, in order to not confuse the people. So it doesn't make sense for the Japanese people to say that they practice Chinese martial arts, and it doesn't make sense for the Chinese people to say that they practice the Japanese martial arts. It doesn't make sense because they have their own arts that are representing their country. But it just so happens that the Africans and the Caucasians don't have martial arts within their countries. So then they are the ones that have the flexibility to decide which Asian country that they want to represent. But because they don't have that Asian blood within them, the martial art master from the Asian country can be very skeptical and very reluctant to train a black or Caucasian person, because they don't know if they're truly going to be loyal to represent their arts. So that's pretty much what I'm trying to explain to the people. It's just a very deep understanding of how this world is, how what's going on in this world, and how these divisions are made. I didn't make these divisions. They're here before I was born. They created the division between China and America, and between Canada and Mexico, and Africa and France. I didn't create these divisions. I'm simply explaining how these divisions work, and how the proper way to categorize and express with very fine detail, like the specifics of what is important in your expression in the martial arts. You need to know who you are, and you need to know what you're practicing. You need to know what you're teaching, and you need to be very accurate with your descriptions. Very precise. Don't be so broad and misinform people. Just like if you ask somebody, what do you do? And they're like, oh, I'm a doctor. Well, what kind of doctor? Like, a doctor for what? There's brain surgeons, there's people that focus on the feet, there's people that focus on heart surgery, there's people that focus on, the eyes, there's people that focus on the teeth, there's people that focus on the ears. There's specifics of what their focus area is in. And you got to be specific with what you actually do, what you practice, and what you're trying to master. So if you are a black person or Caucasian person practicing the martial arts, well, make sure you're learning from a legitimate source. Like, if you're learning the Japanese martial arts, then you should be learning from a Japanese person. You learn Chinese martial arts, you learn from a Chinese person. Like, you can't, and if you're learning from somebody who is black that's teaching Chinese, Kung Fu or the Chinese martial arts, then make sure that he got adequate permission from the real Chinese martial art master to teach you what he's trying to teach you. And that's all that I'm saying. It's not like boxing or basketball where anybody of any race can just participate. It doesn't matter about race, it just matters about performance. That's not the same as art and culture. Because if that was the case, then there's no need to make a distinction between Kung Fu and Karate and Taekwondo and Aikido and Ninjutsu and Jiu-Jitsu. There wouldn't be no need to make these distinctions. There's these distinctions for a reason, because they're all different. Just like I made that example. If Chinese basketball had different rules than American basketball, then we need to make the distinction between American basketball and Chinese basketball, because they have different rules. So it's the same thing with the Chinese martial arts and the Japanese martial arts. They have different principles that they go by. So Not only that, but that a different group of people are practicing and representing each of those arts. So hopefully this video will get you to really think more deeply, about the martial arts and how it should be properly represented.